The menstrual cycle, also known as the ovarian cycle, is defined as noun, the process of ovulation and menstruation in women and other female primates. We can split the menstrual cycle into two halves, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. We'll get into these extensively in a minute. If we want to go even further, we can split the menstrual cycle into 4 quarters: menstruation, pre-ovulation, ovulation, and premenstruation. If some of these words are foreign to you, no worries. We are going to dive deep into all of these phases, so buckle up. My name is Gabrielle, and welcome to Rosy Moons. Today we are going to be doing a deep dive into the menstrual cycle from a scientific point of view. Now, I don't know about you, but no thanks to conventional sex ed, I had no freaking idea what was happening in my body for years after getting my first period. I thought it was just this gosh darn inconvenient thing that would surprise me every month that I just had to deal with. It was never spoken of in a positive light. I no longer think of my period as something negative because I actually understand now what is happening in my body and why. And I want to pass this on to you because you deserve it. Let's begin with the follicular phase. So technically the follicular phase includes menstruation and is defined as the first half of the menstrual cycle, beginning when you start bleeding and ending the moment you ovulate. The average length of the follicular phase is 16 days, including menstruation. However, depending on your unique cycle, it can last anywhere from 11 to 27 days. Menstruation, also known as the menstrual phase, also begins when you start bleeding. However, its duration completes when you stop bleeding. Humans would not exist if females didn't experience menstruation each month. So thank you for your service and sacrifice. If conception, the fertilization of the sperm with the egg, does not happen in the previous cycle, the corpus luteum, a mature version of the follicle that we'll get into later in this video, starts to break down for reabsorption back into the ovary. It's getting juicy now, folks. This breaking down of the corpus luteum causes estrogen and progesterone to drastically drop, beginning the shedding of the endometrium lining of the uterus. Blood and nutrient-rich tissue flow from the uterus through the cervix and out of the vagina, and this is what we call our period. This flow of blood and tissue usually lasts about 3 to 8 days on average. The cramping that can occur on your period is literally due to your uterus contracting to expel this blood and tissue, as well as pieces of tissue being ripped away from the uterus. Sorry if you hear any noise. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they can be pretty loud sometimes. You may also experience other menstrual symptoms, including lower back pain, fatigue, headaches, irritability, bloating, tender breasts, weakened immune system, lower body temperature, etc. The list goes on and on. As you're menstruating, your body is already beginning to prepare for the next cycle. The hypothalamus within your brain starts producing gonadotropin releasing hormone, also known as GnRH, which travels through the bloodstream to the pituitary gland, also within the brain. GnRH triggers the pituitary gland to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, also known as FSH and LH. Traveling through the bloodstream, FSH and LH make their way to your ovaries, where their presence stimulates the growth of 15 to 20 eggs, initiating a race between them, a maturation race. The winning egg then dominates and suppresses the maturation of the other eggs, and the other eggs get reabsorbed back into the ovaries. How cool is that? It gets better. The shell of the dominant egg, called the follicle, hence follicular phase, begins producing estrogen. Estrogen levels will continue to increase steadily until they peak approximately 1 day prior to ovulation. The uterus responds to the estrogen produced by the developing follicle by rebuilding the endometrium lining that was shed during menstruation. This peak of estrogen also signals to the brain that the dominant egg is now mature enough to be released, which triggers the pituitary gland to release a surge of LH. This surge triggers the dominant follicle to rupture and release the matured human egg from the surface of the ovary, otherwise known as ovulation. An interlude occurring midway through the menstrual cycle that divides the follicular and luteal phase. The ruptured egg is then captured by finger-like projections on the end of the fallopian tube called fimbriae, which sweep the egg into the fallopian tube where fertilization usually occurs. Needless to say, ovulating is absolutely necessary for the health and vitality of females in their childbearing years. And benefits include regular cycles, lighter periods, less PMS symptoms like mood swings, acne, anxiety, bloating, a boosted libido, less anxiety and depression, long-term good health and longevity, avoidance of cancers, heart disease, osteoporosis. The list goes on and on. If you're consuming hormonal birth control, you are not ovulating. The purpose of hormonal birth control is actually to suppress ovulation and all of these wonderful benefits along with it. During ovulation, your sexual desire and physical energy is heightened. This can likely be attributed to the brief surge of testosterone. Yes, you heard that right, women have testosterone as well. Along with the release of the egg, your body is actually producing pheromones from every single pore, intended to heighten physiological attraction with a potential mate. Even your facial features slightly realign to appear more symmetrical as you're ovulating. This is all by design because your body's innate priorities are firstly to stay alive and secondly to procreate. You may or may not notice your vaginal secretions to be thick, slippery, wet, meant to lubricate, capture, nourish, and help sperm move towards the egg for fertilization. The uterine lining is now lush, thick, and prepared for a potentially fertilized egg to implant. If you wish to create a human, this is prime time to do the deed and conceive. If you do not wish to create a human, abstain from sex, use natural birth control methods, and or channel that physical and creative boost of energy into projects and pursuits that you wish to birth into the world instead. There's something called a fertile window of about 6 days within the cycle, whereby it is actually possible for the sperm to fertilize the egg and for pregnancy to occur. This is in the 5 days leading up to ovulation and the 24 hours following the egg's release into the fallopian tube. Sperm can actually live inside the female body for about 5 days before dying. So if you have sex within 5 days of ovulating, there's a higher chance you can get pregnant. Just a heads up. After the ruptured follicle releases the egg into the ovary, it closes to form a structure called the corpus luteum, beginning the luteal phase. The luteal phase is the second half of the menstrual cycle, beginning after ovulation and ending when menstruation begins. It can also be referred to as the premenstrual phase. The corpus luteum begins producing both estrogen and progesterone, which signal to the uterus that it is time to prepare for a potentially fertilized egg to implant. Your body does not know whether or not it is pregnant until a fertilized egg implants or does not implant into the uterine lining. So it continues preparing for the possibility. Progesterone levels peak about halfway through the luteal phase. A normal luteal phase can last anywhere between 11 to 17 days, but for most women, it lasts around 12 to 14 days. If fertilization successfully occurred during ovulation or the fertile window, the fertilized egg will travel through the fallopian tube all the way to the uterus, where it will implant within the endometrium lining and begin to grow, and progesterone will continue to be released from the corpus luteum to support that pregnancy. If conception does not occur, the corpus luteum will begin breaking down about 9 to 11 days after ovulation to be reabsorbed into the ovaries. This reabsorption results in a drastic drop in estrogen and progesterone, beginning the shedding of the endometrium lining, also known as menstruation. So the cycle begins all over again. Whew. That was a lot of information all at once. So let's do a recap of the whole cycle, shall we? So as you're menstruating, the hypothalamus within your brain begins producing GnRH. GnRH travels through the bloodstream to the pituitary gland, where it triggers the release of LH and FSH. FSH and LH make their way to your ovaries, where their presence stimulates the release of 15 to 20 eggs and actually initiates a race of maturation between them. The winning egg then dominates and suppresses the maturation of the losing eggs. The shell of the dominant egg, called the follicle, begins producing estrogen. The uterus responds to the estrogen being produced by the developing follicle by rebuilding the uterine lining that was shed during menstruation. Estrogen levels will continue to increase steadily until they peak approximately 1 day prior to ovulation. This peak of estrogen signals to the brain that the developing follicle is now mature enough to be released, which triggers the pituitary gland to release a surge of LH. This surge of LH triggers the dominant follicle to rupture and release the matured egg from the surface of the ovary. The ruptured egg is then captured by finger-like projections on the end of the fallopian tube, which sweep the egg into the fallopian tube, because that's usually where fertilization occurs. After the ruptured follicle releases the egg into the ovary, it closes to form a structure called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum begins producing both estrogen and progesterone, which signals to the uterus that it is time to prepare for a potentially fertilized egg to implant. Progesterone levels peak about halfway through the luteal phase. If conception does not occur, the corpus luteum will begin breaking down to be reabsorbed back into the ovary. This reabsorption results in a drastic drop of estrogen and progesterone, which signals to your body that it's time to begin menstruating, and the cycle begins again. All of this occurs over a 28-day cycle on average. However, anywhere between 23 to 35 days is considered a normal cycle. Did this video help you understand your body better? Let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. If you would like me to do separate videos diving into each phase specifically and their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual effects they may have on you, please leave this flower emoji down below in the comment section. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos, and share this video with your loved ones that you feel may benefit. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and maybe you'll enjoy this video right here.